In this video, I will shortly introduce the article co-authored with Beste İşleyen, entitled Guilty Knowledge, a postcolonial inquiry into knowledge, suspicion, and responsibility in the fight against terrorism financing. This article addresses how court cases establish criminal intent in terrorism financing trials. We particularly focus on court cases about families in Europe who have sent money to their children who have left their home countries to join armed groups in Syria and Iraq. We particularly focus on two jurisdictions, which we empirically study, the Netherlands and the UK. Allow me to start with an empirical example of one of the court cases. On the 31st of January 2020, two parents appeared in front of a Dutch court in Rotterdam on charges of terrorism financing, after they had sent money to their daughter, who had traveled to Syria in 2013 to join her well-known Dutch foreign fighter husband. Shortly after her arrival in Syria, the daughter regretted this decision and told her parents that she wanted to return to the Netherlands. Desperate to support their daughter and their grandchildren, the parents sent money to Syria with the hope that their daughter would find a way to escape. In the period between July 2014 and April 2017, they made multiple transactions, accumulating to an amount of 4,500 euros. For this transaction, they now stand trial on charges of terrorism financing. During the case, the judge tries to reconstruct the knowledge of the parents at the time of the transaction to establish criminal intent. The judge asks, "I want to talk about the money. You said that you had transferred money to your daughter, who traveled with her husband. You say you don't have any knowledge about him, but there is information about him and what he did in Syria. Did you not learn about this in the newspaper, on the radio, on the news?" The father then responds to the judge and says, "I don't watch the news and I don't read the papers. I wake up early in the morning to go to work and I return late at night." The mother furthermore responds, "I am illiterate and mentally I have been struggling with this." As you can see, establishing criminal intent is an important part of this court case. Countering terrorism financing has long been part of European security practices. For a conviction in a terrorism financing case, it's enough to prove that the sender had reasonable cause to suspect that the money might be used for terrorist purposes. As such, you don't actually have to prove that the money was used for a terrorist activity, but that the sender accepted the possibility that it might happen. Because of this preemptive logic, even family members appear in front of the court, as we saw in the example. So what becomes important in these court cases is to establish what these defendants should have known about where their money will end up. In the article, we use the notion of the duty to know to unpack how this responsibility on individual citizens is assessed in front of the court. Drawing on insights from critical security studies, especially work on preemptive security and law, science and technology studies, and postcolonial studies, we explore in our article how this duty to know is defined, assessed, and challenged in court cases in order to determine criminal intent. The article makes two central contributions. First, we show how different aspects of affective relations in regarding family life are policed by the state apparatus and legal practices. We particularly show how Muslim families are subjected to these policies and practices. Second, our empirical analysis shows that trust and testing are fundamental knowledge practices enacted by the defendants. The families deliberately carve out the conditions under which they send money, and the defendants in our cases were neither blinded nor lost sight of reality as the court suggested. Rather, we show in the article that they were actively engaged in the reality of their children, the complicated terrorist context in which they had to navigate their decision-making. These knowledge-making practices, however, were dismissed as embodied knowledge by the court and juxtaposed against a more generalized and securitized view on Syria and Iraq, considered to be common knowledge. Hierarchy also exists between subjects in the courtroom, where state representatives such as prevent officials or governmental officials are allowed to be doubtful, hesitant, even uncertain about the possible terrorist threat, while citizens are held to high standards of knowing and preemptively assessing what might happen with their money. In the article, therefore, we show that the parents are not ignorant or non-knowledgeable, but that their knowledge is rendered situated, emotional, and displaying credulity. What they rather expected to have is a securitized understanding of the Middle East and events happening in the region. If you want to learn more about legal struggles to define what counts as credible knowledge in terrorism trial, read our article for a detailed empirical analysis.